Hello everyone, welcome back to just another F1 podcast here on the Apex Motorsport. My name is Sergio Smyth and we've just had the Mexico City Grand Prix. And joining me to discuss this one is of course Ryan Caldwell. Ryan, hope you enjoyed that race. Probably wasn't one of the better races of the season, but there's still a good bit to talk about. But just describe the race in 3 words.
My first choice of 3 words would be not very interesting. And my second choice of 3 words would be Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez.
Okay, interesting choice of words there. I think we were just going to jump straight into this by talking about Verstappen taking the lead into turn 1 as Bottas, he left the door open, and obviously then we follow on with that with sort of the carnage of turn 1. There was a few crashes and one did involve Bottas, but do you think that was Bottas not really caring, or do you think that just Verstappen had that good of a start that Bottas could do nothing about that?
I think what happened was, he's starting P1 and he knows Lewis is right beside him. So he's going to be more enticed to try and keep an eye on his right side rather than his left, because he knows Verstappen's going to be behind him. He's like, no way is he going to get past us. Like, we're at the front. And he just didn't check enough on the left-hand side that, at the end of that there, the white line, he can go past it. And so he did. And then obviously Max went out and was like, see you guys, because he got the slipstream, and we all know what happened next.
Well, we know that the Mexico circuit is traditionally a Red Bull track. Red Bull have always performed strongly there. Do you think Lewis Hamilton didn't really stand a chance? Obviously, the Verstappen won the race in the end up to extend his championship lead, but do you think Hamilton, there was just no way he was going to win, that Mercedes' performance in qualifying was helped by Tsunoda throwing Perez off and distracting Verstappen? That's what the line Christian Horner is using. But do you think that just Red Bull were always going to end up as race winners?
Yeah, I think we've seen the performance throughout the whole weekend through FP1, FP2 and FP3. Obviously qualifying just didn't go their way. It's funny because everyone, even Christian Horner, blamed Tsunoda for it, but he actually didn't go off track just to go off track, as an accident. He just sort of did it to get out of the way, but in doing so, it sort of caught Perez's attention to think, oh, has he gone off? And obviously you're unsure then, has he gone off? Is that a yellow flag? Do I back off, or what happens here? And then he's just too much thinking and not enough driving, and then of course Max sees the two of them and he's like, oh, well, that's going to be a yellow flag, so he backed off. So you're just left with two Red Bulls backing off, with the 2 Mercedes having probably their best laps of the whole weekend. So even though that whole little incident happened, Red Bull were strong throughout, and I think they sort of had the strategy in their mind of what they were going to do as long as Max got past in that first corner, which I'm pretty sure they expected him to do, just slipstreaming off Bottas. There was a big enough gap between the grid spaces, and by the time Bottas left and Max left, it's just a matter of time before he managed to actually just pass them.
It is interesting how quickly Christian Horner turned the blame onto Tsunoda, and we all know AlphaTauri is the Red Bull B team, the sister team, and Tsunoda is a Red Bull junior driver. He does have a seat for next season, as we know, but given how the other teams in the grid rallied around and supported him, where his management team were criticising him quite openly, not internally, do you think that sort of really highlighting sort of the way that Red Bull setup is, that they just don't really care about the AlphaTauri drivers that much?
Well, I think we've sort of seen that over the past couple of years, ever since Ricciardo and Max, even then when they both crashed and they each other going into a corner, there was tension then, and I think those sort of unfriendly vibes, whose side do we take, or do we just tell them they're both stupid? No, let's take Max's side. And every time it seems to be, obviously they're going to focus on their own team before the sister team, and we've seen that with Gasly. He came up and they just didn't like him. They didn't like how he performed. They didn't give him a chance to finish out his season, and they were like, nope, don't care, you're going back. Brought in Albon once again, brought him in, it was okay, and then things started to slope off. Didn't give him a chance to retain a seat again for another year, just to get more comfortable with the car and perform, which we've seen with Perez. The only difference is Perez has a lot more experience, going from car to car, and even a whole regulation change. He knows the difference in cars, So it was obviously easier for him to get more comfortable. But just the way that they're, I would say negative towards most of them. It's, how do you explain it? They just always have this same sort of mindset that they don't care what goes on around them. They are themselves and they focus on themselves as one.
Obviously for Tsunoda, when it comes to the actual Grand Prix, he didn't make it past, I think, turn 1 or the first lap anyway, because of that carnage turn 1. We've obviously seen Ricciardo, I think, mistime his braking in a way, and Bottas probably trying to cut Ricciardo off in a way, probably distracted by the fact that Max Verstappen was coming to his left-hand side, which obviously spun Bottas round and probably ended any real possibility of Mercedes keeping the Red Bull cars behind. But do you think, in terms of Ricciardo, that it was simply he mistimed his braking or a bit of payback for earlier on the season?
Yeah, I think he just went in too hot, as you've seen even watching the race. He locked up on the front, so he definitely went in too late. There's Ricciardo was the latest of breakers, but we've now seen Max is currently taking that top seat, and that how would you call it?
No. Title.
That title
yeah.
Title of the late breakers. So I think he just really misjudged it, and by the time he was able to sort of half correct himself, there was too much going on around him, so he just ended up, hit the back of Bottas, spun him round. Obviously he damaged his own wings, so it wasn't exactly like, he gained an advantage, which is probably how he managed to, not pick up a penalty, because he still had to go into the pit himself. So it's hard to know what was going on.
I think one thing that was interesting about Valtteri Bottas was, become the end of the race, he was told there's no way you're getting points, so obviously he can finish anywhere from 11th down and not score points. So they kept pitting him to try to get the fastest lap that Verstappen had. Verstappen then slowed right down to block him, very Hamilton-esque 2016 Abu Dhabi against Rosberg, trying to slow him down to avoid. Well, he could have overtaken him because he was the faster car and he was unlapping himself, but just so Verstappen got the extra point, which could be very crucial in this championship battle. But do you think Mercedes, that was them sort of going, yeah, we know this is going to be very crucial for both drivers and the Constructors' Championships? They have to sacrifice Bottas from now to win both championships.
Yeah, well, if you look at it, like, Max is nearly, I don't know how many points, like at least 20 points in the lead.
I think it's 26, maybe 25, 24, 26, something around that. It's a race win and difference.
A race 1.5 between it. Like, it probably will go down to Abu Dhabi, as long as Mercedes pick up some good points coming into Sao Paulo.
And Saudi Arabia gets built in time.
And it's crazy. I thought it was already halfway finished. It's nowhere near finished. They literally, it looks like they only started last week. Oh, what was I trying to say there? I've forgotten what we were chatting about.
Bottas and the pitting for the fastest lap.
Oh yeah, that's right. I think they just they realized we have to submit to this, and we're not going to get any points from you at all. And what's better than you gaining a point? It's still going to be a point difference between us. We'll take a point off Red Bull instead, and a point off Max, which means it's a point less for Hamilton to gain, and it's a point less for the team to gain. There's a difference between the two at this moment in time, and that point, that's crucial, because that's the difference in one car retiring and one car getting that single point in P10. That is the difference right now as it stands. And
the difference between first and second is multiple millions of pounds and a lot of bragging rights, because Mercedes, if they win this championship, they'll have gone through the entire hybrid era of winning both titles. If Hamilton, of course, wins the Drivers' Championship, which he currently isn't leading, but it's still a possibility, that would be something I think Mercedes would be really proud of, and something I don't think we'll ever see again, because I think the way things are going with these, the climate change stuff, that the cars and the engines are going to have to keep evolving to keep up with that some team, there'll always be a team that'll be a step ahead or working 3-4 years in advance. That I don't think's happened since 2014. So yeah, I think this single point battle is going to be very interesting. With I think it's 4 races after the season. Yeah, 4. It's going to be quite interesting. But obviously, Bottas had a difficult weekend in terms of where he finished. But Red Bull's so-called second driver, in heavy quotation marks, is their second driver, Sergio Perez. He's starting to find his form. Obviously, it was his home circuit, home race. Mexican crowd was loving Perez going around the circuit, especially through that stadium circuit. And then obviously his dad and the cheering after, that was quite special. His son on the podium as well, quite special to see. But do you think this Perez is finally finding his form for Red Bull at a very crucial time, that this is going to be the difference between them winning and losing the championship?
Yeah, the difference between Perez right now and Bottas is it's quite parallel to each other. If you look at Bottas and Perez last year, obviously Perez was on fire with it's not forcing it was the Racing Point, and it wasn't the BWT Racing Point, it was just the Racing Point.
It was the BWT Aston Martin Racing Point Formula 1 team. It wasn't even that.
Yeah, because Aston Martin's only just come
in. It's some confusion.
So, Sport Pesa.
Racing.
Or was that the year before? I can't mind. Anyway, if you reverse those roles, Bottas was obviously the better, well, not the better driver, but obviously he had a better car behind him. And they were both using Mercedes engines. And yes, they both were technically Mercedes that year because of the redesign that happened. They got away with it. So, fair play. So I guess they sort of were an equal machinery in a sense, but sort of like
you're behind.
Here's my homework, copy it, but change up a few things.
Yeah,
I think we've made this point a million times. I think over the last year at least, but I think on paper Bottas definitely had a better standards not better standards, but a better driving style last year because he was in that fight. He really was in the fight. This year he just sort of he knows that he's going. He knew that George was going to come up, so he tried at the start, and then obviously everything happened to him, and it sort of dipped off massively. Where Perez has went into this team, and he's fighting that bull, and he's really trying to stay in that seat for as long as he can, because he knows come next year there is a chance that behind the scenes Honda and Red Bull have actually got a really good package coming next year with the regulation changes, and Mercedes have spent quite a lot of time this year. Obviously it's Mercedes, so they're still going to be working hard back in the factory, but I still think Mercedes have spent a little bit too much upgrading their car this year, as well as having the engine problems they did have, which has also been a poor sacrifice for Bottas. 5 engine penalties now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 5 new engines and 3 of them's penalties, isn't it? Can a man's luck get any worse? He's probably the most unluckiest driver I think in the grid in the last, I'd say, 10 years, and that's coming from Perez, who actually had to bail out his own team at one point.
Yeah.
So between the two, I think it's quite an even battle, but I do think Perez has the upper edge coming on now to the end of the season, which needs to be looked at because he's going to be a threat come to these last couple of races and points.
I think there's the potential that Hamilton is going to take his 5-place penalty this weekend because the team have found a water pressure issue. Not yet been confirmed yet, but half of the team's equipment hasn't yet made it to the circuit. We're recording this on the Thursday before the Sao Paulo Grand Prix in Brazil. Half the equipment some teams don't have a car, some teams don't have an engine. They've got rid of the curfew so the teams can work through the night, so there might not even be an FP1, FP2 tomorrow. It depends, because I think, I don't know, there's probably something in the sporting regulations that all teams have to have their equipment there, so it could be interesting. All the teams and drivers are there, just the equipment. I think it's in LA on a plane somewhere that's been held up getting into Brazil. There's vague reports coming out, but some teams don't have their stuff there as we're recording. But to go back to the Mercedes and their reliability issues, Andy Cowell obviously heavily involved in the new hybrid era. He left the team early in the season, and since then reliability has just gone completely. And do you think that it's something that Mercedes will regret going next season? Because if he hasn't spent as much time working on next year's engine, and the same people who are currently working on the engines at Brixworth now or going into next season, it could be a case of Mercedes starting the back row every single race next year.
Oh, well, I can't see them being as bad as the Williams, because the Williams obviously get the years before engine, which means they'll have this year's engine, which means more problems for them.
They now have the current. They have to all have the current engines.
Oh, all
now.
the same engine?
Yeah, I think it was the last season or two, because obviously Sauber, Alfa Romeo used to have the old Ferrari engines. Everyone has to have the same engine now.
Well, that makes no sense for Haas then, because, well, they're still slow and they're still, what's going on there.
Yeah.
Williams can make a big step, but Haas can't, and they Ferraris are showing a wee bit more competitiveness. Alpha at times shows a wee bit of competitiveness, but Haas is just, we're going to stick to an old style aero package with a newer engine and hope that it works, because next year's our chance. Don't think it's happening.
No. We're talking about Ferrari powered engines, so might as well talk about Ferrari. They obviously have a battle with McLaren for P3, the championship. It's good to see Ferrari back up there fighting higher up the grid this year than they were last year.
On merit, shall I add?
Yes, and McLaren last year were very impressive, but I think some of their results were inflated due to Ferrari struggles, where this year McLaren has still been impressive, but they haven't, in my opinion, haven't been at the same level, but they've got podiums, and of course Ricciardo won that race. It was Monza he won, wasn't it?
Yes.
So obviously they've probably overachieved this year compared to last year, outperformed last year, not overachieved. But Ferrari had a very solid weekend, and do you think that they're just going to claim this P3, and if they do, how disappointed do you think McLaren would be to give that up?
I don't see it as like a thing for Ferrari. I would be happy enough to see. I would actually be more happy to see Ferrari finishing fourth in the constructors than to see them in third, because it means they get more time to work on aero and more time, to really get their package together for next year. Ferrari have been really quiet this year in terms of upgrades, so I think they have been spending a lot more time working on next year's car, which, to be honest, I think is the right option. Now, come down to it, obviously they're still, if they finish in third, they're still going to have more time than Red Bull and Mercedes, because without a doubt they're obviously the top two teams right now, and there's no challenging between them. They're just that far ahead. I think Ferrari would actually be near enough better suited taking those extra couple of hours in the wind tunnel over the likes of McLaren, because if anything, it means McLaren's at a disadvantage. You have an advantage. The two teams are quite close to one another. I'd rather have an advantage come the end of the season than a disadvantage going into next season. That's how I would see it for Ferrari.
Especially for a team like Ferrari, where money isn't that big of an issue for them. McLaren, I know they've said that in the next, I think, 5 years or so, they will be a profitable company in terms of Formula 1, which is great to see, because we know McLaren have been struggling recently in terms of money, but there's something about McLaren. I think Ferrari have been, as I said, been very quiet all year. They're a team that you could nearly call them the forgotten team of the season, because it's very rarely I think we discuss them on the podcast, because they're always just
there,
5th, 6th, 7th, just around that area. No real standout performances, albeit there's a couple of exceptions in there. But last year with the whole the Vettel drama leaving and the Matteo Binotto, the bad decisions, and this year it's just been quiet. Matteo Binotto's obviously staying behind. He's not going to the last few races to focus on next year's car. So Ferrari have just been quiet. Where McLaren, there's a real positive attitude about them, and I don't know if that's helping with their success in IndyCar with Pato O'Ward and to bring this new American audience, and Lando Norris going into the season with a bigger fan base, and obviously Danny Rick coming to the team, huge fan base. And this year, I think since the summer break, he's really come on as a driver. We all know what he's this eight-time Grand Prix winner now. He obviously won that race, and since then he hasn't looked back. And just how glad are you to see Daniel Ricciardo finally showing us the performances that we know he can produce.
Yeah, it was quite obvious at the start of the season. Lando was obviously the number one driver, had the upper hand. Coming in now into the second half of the season, I'm starting to notice, Daniel's starting to slightly outperform Lando in places. Now, obviously, last race, Lando knew he was taking an engine penalty, or so he knew he didn't really have to try as much. But even still, in practice, you still want to try, find your marks, find your fastest racing line, and Daniel was ahead of him for most of it. So is Daniel starting to, get comfortable with his car? It's still probably going to take him the guts of the year. So the last 4 races, he'll probably understand every track he's been to, and come next year when he's in a new car, once again, that everyone's going to have to learn, we could see the grid shake up a wee bit, but I think Daniel might actually have the edge over Lando come next season.
I think it's definitely proven that the drivers who had the same seat last season, the start of the season, they were definitely the superior drivers. They were more comfortable. But the drivers who are new to their teams, new to the cars, they're definitely finding the groove, and some of them have put in some very impressive drives as of late. But we all know the Formula 1 grid for next season is set apart from one seat, and that is the second Alfa Romeo seat. We know Valtteri Bottas is moving from Mercedes down.
Bye Kimi.
George Russell moving up, and Alex Albon moving from Red Bull Reserve to Williams. So it's
big shake up.
Yeah, big shake up. Be interesting to see how Albon stuff gets on after a year out. But obviously we've seen Apple Falcon, and he come back probably a more complete driver. So be interested to see how Albon worked, obviously with the DTM program and stuff. But Giovinazzi, he had a little go at his team after the race, sarcastically thanking them for their strategy. Wasn't quite good. They brought him out in the traffic. He didn't have an enjoyable race at all. Do you think his time's up? Do you think that he's done enough to get the seat for next season?
See, I'm in a bit of not a soft spot, but in a place where Gio, he came into the sport a wee bit later than what most Formula 1 drivers are coming in at now. And he was a part of the Ferrari Academy at one stage,
Yeah, but he still is.
He's in, would have been in the Sauber seat. No, that's Kimi.
Yeah, he's in the Ferrari seat.
Yeah, he's in the Ferrari
which
seat.
No longer exists.
Yeah. So he was sort of waiting for his chance to possibly get into Ferrari, which we obviously know that's not going to happen with Charles Leclerc still another 2 years in his contract or so.
Yeah, he's a long-term
contract. And then
contract.
Carlos is locked in for another year, so that's not going to happen. So for Gio, it's sort of like you're kind of a half decent driver on your day, but consistency wise, even Kimi, a guy who's been in the sport for this long, and he's like 40, and he's not the 40's old, but like he is 40 years of age. Lewis isn't too far behind now, just to nod it on the head. It's like comparing. Well, actually, I can't compare him because that wouldn't be fair. It's like, come on, you should be beating Kimi. You're younger, you have faster reactions, but then Kimi just comes out with his experience, and he's just like, I do this for fun. Mm-hmm. I'm not even doing this to win. I'm just doing this for fun, and I'm still beating this guy who's trying to make a successful career. I think Giovinazzi might have to let way for a new up and coming talent.
See, the issue I have is I think Giovinazzi is a solid driver. If Formula 1 teams have 3 cars, I think Gio definitely deserves to be on the grid. If it's a bigger grid, I think he's done enough. Obviously, he come into the sport, I think he replaced Pascal Wehrlein 2017, I think it was. It was the first 2 races of the season. Didn't have the best of times. Remember, he crashed out just before the finish line in China, I think it was. But obviously then it meant that he done 2 races, so he didn't come into the season as a rookie, which I think because he didn't have that title, a lot of people didn't consider him to be a rookie, although it was his first full rookie season, and put a bit more pressure on him. And obviously the links to Ferrari made things a lot more pressurised for him. But the drivers who are linked to be his replacement, Guan Yu Zhou, who has been sold in Formula 2 but has been nothing special. But when your sponsorship's offering, I think it was something like 30 million to have in the seat, it means that he's probably favourite. Nick de Vries was linked to the Williams seat and the Alfa Romeo seat, the current Formula E champion, 2019 Formula 2 champion. Very good driver, probably deserves a seat in Formula 1, but didn't get that opportunity. I don't think he's in the running. Then you have Mick Schumacher, who was linked to move over. He's obviously been confirmed for Haas. Cal Milot, another driver, but I think he's doing another year of Ferrari's reserve driver. And apart from that, there's no one else. Well, Nico Hulkenberg was linked, but potentially he did rule out a move to IndyCar. He done the test, said he needs to think about something. Potential return, very unlikely. So I think Guan Yu Zhou's the favourite for the seat. Personally, I don't think he's done enough to get the seat, but then when there's drivers like Mazepin in the sport, the money talks, and we're going to see probably Guan Yu Zhou in that second Alfa Romeo seat. But with a driver like Bottas, who probably is easier to learn from than the likes of Kimi Räikkönen, probably a bit more communication in there, and I think Bottas would be a good coach and good mentor, which could mean Guan Yu Zhou could become a solid driver to get to the same level with Gio, maybe be a little bit better in a couple of years. But with, I think Andretti are looking to potentially buy Alfa Romeo.
I thought that was sort of already been turned down.
It has, but it's one of these things where they'll keep coming back. I know they were trying to get Colton Herta into FP1 in Texas, which to me looks like there's already a sort of working relationship there. And Colton Herta in Formula 1 would be incredible. I would love to see that. I think Colton Herta is one of the best up-and-coming drivers. He's already one of the stars of the IndyCar series. To see him in Formula 1, it would be really good. But I think it depends on Alfa Romeo. If they're in it long term, I think to go for Guan Yu Zhou because the money involved. But if they think, hold on, we're only going to be in this for another season or two, to have that level of consistency with Giovinazzi for another year, I think would be good. And obviously experience to help Bottas use a Ferrari engine, which he hasn't done ever. So it'd be quite interesting. But we'll move on now to an incident that happened in the last race, the US Grand Prix. And I know we touched on it briefly in the last podcast. Martin Brundle, you can't do that, I don't know anyway, or something along those lines. They brought in this so-called Brundle Rule. It's been nicknamed that, where celebrities can no longer have their bodyguards on the grid. They're meant to be open now to do interviews. Something that has divided social media quite a bit. There's a lot of people who are like, yes, it's the right thing to do. If you're on the grid, you should respect the people on the grid, the media, you should chat. But then there's also the people going, actually, they shouldn't have to. It's up to celebrities. You can't go up to a random person in the street and ask them questions. You can, but they might say no, and it's confusing. It caused a lot of controversy. But Rangers, do you think this is the right way forward for Formula 1, or do you think it's unnecessary to just keep bringing it up more and more?
I'll tell you where I'm at with it. I'm not exactly on the fence. I'm already over the fence in terms of I'm on Brundle's side, but there's still a bit of me, maybe a bit of barbed wire that's holding me onto the fence. That's been like, maybe it has been taken a wee bit too much out of context. I do feel that, if you've been invited onto the grid, you've been invited down by a team, which means that team has shown interest in you, and you have also shown interest in the sport. Now, if you're coming down to be with a team, you should at least have, well, this is where people were, arguing about, should they have to then go and get familiar with the sport before they come to the grid? Not entirely. They can still come down and do an interview and be all, I'm just excited, the cars look amazing, I'm meeting so many amazing and talented people, it's a really good experience. You don't have to go in there and be all, yeah, the aero package on Mercedes looks a lot stronger this weekend, and nobody's going to actually ask you them sort of questions, but having some sort of, not even just a general sort of motorsport idea, understanding maybe, what teams are bigger than the others, and in that sort of sense is how I would see it.
You should really, if you're invited by a team, you should know the basics of that team and the structure, who the drivers are. Because if Martin Brundle comes up to you and you're a guest of Aston Martin, you say, who do you want to win? Oh, obviously I would Lance Stroll, Sebastian Vettel to win. It's unlikely they would, but
yeah,
you're invited by a team, or you hope to have a good weekend. You're not going to be invited down by Red Bull and say, yeah, I want Lewis Hamilton to win. That's not going to happen. But a lot of these celebrities sometimes don't even know which team has invited them down, which I think is causing a bit of an issue. And we've seen. I know you mentioned last podcast Roy McIlroy.
Yes.
That conversation, just asking them about the football, just to bring in different audiences, because not only the Formula One audience was watching, but then the golf audience seen Roy McIlroy. They're like, oh, I know him. Then the football audience was brought in by asking the question.
What are they chatting about?
That's three of Sky's biggest sort of sports all brought into that one question.
Apart from horse racing.
Yeah. All brought in to ask one question, and that's what the grid box about. And then you mix that up where you'll get a total off in the grid or almost half an hour just to mix it up a bit. And with the odd celebrity, big name, bring the audience. If you're watching a house of people, a family, not everyone's interested. There might be a celebrity that someone knows, or a singer, or someone on TikTok, or some social media star, and it just helps increase the popularity. But when you've got moments where people are just being controversial and going, no, you can't speak to me, it doesn't cause a good image for them. Publicity wise, it's the best thing they can do, because everyone's still talking about it.
As the saying goes, all publicity is good publicity.
Yeah, but I think it's one of these things where I think, and Martin Brundle has said, it's sort of been blown out of proportion a little bit. It's a lot bigger than it was, because it happened and I immediately forgot about it till after the race, until I started seeing more and more people talk about it. Ryan, we'll ask this question. One celebrity you would love to see on the grid?
In terms of with a motorsport connection or without a motorsport? Without a motorsport connection. Let's see. It depends. It has to be. If it was to be at Silverstone,
it can be someone who's already been on the grid.
Wow. I don't pay too much particular attention to see who's actually there every at the weekend at the events. I would like to see
connect an audience, to bring a whole new audience, someone that you think nearly everyone watching would know, and that would be an interview that will be clipped down.
I am so stupid. I don't know if he's ever actually been to a Formula. I think he has been to a Formula One race. I'm not sure. Jonathan Ray. Are we thinking?
Oh, okay,
Jonathan Ray.
yes.
World Superbike. World Superbike. I got that right. Yeah, World Superbike. He's got 7 of them. 6. He's almost matching Lewis Hamilton with 7. Well, I don't think he's had the best season
this year.
But he's got the full, pretty much motorbike scene in Northern Ireland and quite a lot around the world. Everyone in Northern Ireland knows who Jonathan Ray is, and if it's the same as Roy McIlroy, one of Northern Ireland's probably one of the best golfers, and then there's Darren Clark, but nobody really talks about him no more.
Graham McDowell, we can't remember.
Him. But it's not even just about bringing one country's little thing, because we've already got Rory McIlroy here in Northern Ireland. Obviously, we're from Northern Ireland, that's why we talk like this and sound like this, and we talk a wee bit faster than what you can probably understand, which is why I'm talking even quicker, even though you probably don't understand me, but I'm still talking, and Richard's going to understand me, but you can't understand me. Yes, perfect, makes sense. Yes, but I think having people who are bigger, than some of the actual drivers themselves. Like, Nikita Mazepin is not as big as Jonathan Ray. In my eyes, not a chance. If you even took someone who's just recently gotten slightly bigger in the music scene, like obviously they had Megan Thee Stallion, but she's in a different type of persona altogether. If you have someone who's interactive with fans and stuff. So okay, I'm gonna take a different route here, and this is gonna be funny, because he doesn't really like Formula One that much, but he'd probably still be really happy. And this is a very niche one for me. KSI. Now, as funny as it sounds, he's got the UK publicity now through being on the news, BBC Breakfast, ITV, Lorraine. He's done Red Nose Day events. Like, everyone is starting to realise who this guy is. He's in the charts, music wise. Everyone knows him off of YouTube. He's a big figure gotten, as well as obviously the boxing part, which everyone's sort of trying to forget about now, because he's sort of moved past that. He'd probably be a big celebrity if he was at Silverstone, because everybody would be like, oh, and then the American fans who actually watch him would be like, oh, he likes this sport now. It's all about bringing fans in and inclusivity. I do think one thing about the Brundle Rule that I'm actually I would say appreciative, but I don't mean appreciative. I mean, like, glad of. Bodyguards gone. because you're at a track and no one gets on that, pit straight anyway. That's not, official personnel. So there's no real worry to, worry about someone coming up and grabbing you or, attacking you, because it's not going to happen. It's televised, it's public, and how many thousands of eyes is going to be watching you? You're safe. You don't need bodyguards. Yeah. And if you are if you have been handed the mic in front of your face and you're not really comfortable to chat, just sort of speak for a wee second and say, I don't, I like it here, but I really must go and, visit my team, just as a way to get out of it, not in terms of getting out of it, but if you don't feel comfortable, at least there's a way you can get out of it, and still be respectful of the sport. You want to go see your team. That's the easy way out. Instead of just having some guy shoving you off and being all, you can't do that. I can because I did.
Yes. We'll talk now a little bit about the Mexican City Grand Prix podium, because we all remember Hamilton a couple of years ago with the stand on top of the car, rising up as race winner. Verstappen took a slightly different approach by sitting with a very smug face on the car, knowing that potentially this championship's sewn up for him. It was a very Max Verstappen-esque moment, and just very, very quickly in this one, would you like to see that style podium be at more races, or do you think keep it in Mexico, it's just Mexico?
Keep it in Mexico, because that's a Mexico thing. It's like Monza, you have it over the track, and everyone's there and everyone can get in. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing, and I suppose most tracks sort of have the same sort of layout. It's in the pits, so it's really just personnel only, and everyone has to watch from behind the race barrier. But it's different that way. That one was in probably the biggest grandstand ever, which means everyone who buys a ticket there can see this amazing thing happen. But I just imagine if Perez had done it, would they have had more smoke? Like, would they have smoke machines at this, a Mexican god almost appearing from the darkness just to lift his big trophy? Would have been insane to see, because I think, I don't even know what would have happened if he actually won the race. It'd been unreal. Yeah, it
would have been. I agree with you in saying keep it in Mexico, because it's just a thing that we see in Mexico, and it's something we get excited for. The race wasn't that good, but everyone watched the podium.
The celebrations was better.
Yes.
You had Checo's son and his dad.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Can it get any better than that?
Yeah. Obviously, there's one bit of news which hasn't yet been confirmed, and if it is, we'll discuss that in the next podcast. But Oddmar Safnauer, the team principal of Aston Martin, is heavily linked with a move to Alpine in a restructure. We'll talk more about that in the next podcast, if and when it's confirmed. But we'll finish with some predictions for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. It's not the Brazilian Grand Prix. I must say, I do apologise to everyone for their coverage of the last race, because I've been calling it the Mexican Grand Prix the entire time. Yes, I was only after
Mexico
the race
City Grand Prix.
I realised it was the Mexico City Grand Prix. This is the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, previously known as the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Better than the name change of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix?
Yeah.
Or whatever the other one was that was completely crazy.
Yeah, they made Italy. Yeah. Something that took about 5 takes, one podcast to record. But Ryan, just quickly, are you a fan of these races being called after their cities, like Mexico City, Sao Paulo, and I think it's only really come in because of last year having 3 races in Italy. Do you think it should be named after the country, or do you think we'll start seeing the Silverstone Grand Prix appear soon?
Yeah, there's some that I would imagine I would like to keep, the same, because calling it the Shanghai Grand Prix, it doesn't hit the same, does it?
I think Miami will be different because there's already an American race.
Because there's always, so it will become like the Texan Grand Prix or something like that.
There'll be a couple of races where I think it works, like Miami.
Yes.
Mexico City, not so much. Sao Paulo, not so much. It sounds very street track. If it was a street circuit, I could see it work.
Yeah, I think it works better for street circuits.
Yeah. It's something that I'm sure we can discuss another time, but we'll get into these predictions now. I don't have the predictions with me for the last race. I don't think we've done too well. We never do.
Points will be worked out at the end of the season.
Yes.
At some point.
It's purely for tension and cliffhanger reasons that we don't have them. Definitely not because I forgot to bring them with me. But we'll move. Well, would you like to go first to your predictions?
So sure, why not?
I'm trying to think of the first one we usually pole position. Oh, this is a sprint race.
Yes.
Sprint qualifying, not sprint race.
Yes.
We have to make that clear. And the last 2 times there has been sprint qualifying, Hamilton and Verstappen have collided in the race. So if that happens 3 times in a row, that would be mental. Although Hamilton is unlikely to be starting at the front if he takes this ancient penalty, unless he can qualify.
So does that mean Daniel Ricciardo's going to win again?
Could do. Obviously Hamilton won a Silverstone, so this is where our bold predictions come in. So qualifying is on Friday night, so the day you're hopefully listening to this podcast, if you're listening the day it comes out, Friday morning. We do apologise, it's a bit later this week. It's been very hectic from all me, Craig and Ryan, just all of us, just very busy, but we've managed to find a little bit of time to get this out. But we'll start with pole position. No, fastest qualifier, because pole position is 7th Saturday, which will change for next year. But
Yes.
so fastest qualifier on Friday evening.
So who will win the sprint race?
No, who will in
qualifying for the sprint race.
Yes.
Yes. So qualifying for the sprint race, I would imagine, just due to the same factors that affected this, and I think they'll get it right this time. I think it will be Max Verstappen.
Okay, I'm going to go for Lewis Hamilton. I'm just going to do the opposite.
Oh well, this makes it very easy.
Yeah. So now it's going to be the sprint race winner.
Yes.
I'll go first in this one. We'll do turnabout. I'm going to go Valtteri Bottas, because Hamilton's not going to start on pole because he's going to get the engine penalty.
Yes.
So does that give Verstappen an easy one or someone else?
I was gonna say that.
Actually, hold on.
Apart from the
Hamilton will start on pole for the sprint race if he does top qualifying, because the penalties come in the actual Grand Prix.
Yes.
This is so confusing.
I was just about to say I think it would be Bottas, because into turn 1 I think there will be contact and Bottas will see that coming and go around them. That's why I was also going to say Bottas, but if you've already gone that, we need to make it interesting and spicy. So we'll go for the person who's most likely going to be behind them again. We'll stick it in with Lando Norris.
But will contact happen in the sprint race when there's only 3 points up for grabs?
Possibly. You don't know what's going to happen. It sets it's pretty much sets the race too. So who wants to get? And I think at this track, being in pole actually is a benefit over being in second or third.
So who was it you said?
I'll go with Lando Norris.
Oh, interesting.
Well,
okay.
As you said, if they're going to have contact, and Bottas, you've already chose Bottas, I think Lando will be up there in 4th. So I think he might actually end up passing them all.
So the actual Grand Prix winner, you can go first in this one.
I think Mercedes might actually get some strategy done well, because it's difficult because you always remember this track as the one where Lewis Hamilton won with was McLaren, wasn't it?
2008
yes.
Team O'Glock.
Yeah, it's like I want to believe that Mercedes can do something like that. Like Mercedes tend to be sort of half strong at this track. But Red Bull,
it's a Red Bull track.
It is a Red Bull track. That's the problem. Like it's tighter corners, which Mercedes is more high speed. Obviously, there is a nice, good long straight coming from the last corner around that's nice. I think Hamilton might actually win this one to open it back up again.
Okay, I'm gonna go for Verstappen.
Actually, no, wait, he's having a penalty.
Well, he might not. It's not yet confirmed.
Well, if he has a penalty, he'll not be able to climb that grid. It'll be too.
It'll only be a 5-place grid penalty.
Oh, it's only 5 places?
Yeah.
So strategy wise, it'll only bring him up to probably about second, because if Max gets away, Max is gone. Max is gone. So,
we'll both go for Verstappen win if you want, because we've got
Verstappen win if no penalty.
Yes.
If no penalty, Hamilton wins. If there is a penalty to Hamilton, the engine penalty, Verstappen wins.
Okay, we'll add this to the debate at the end of the season.
The debatable ones.
There's probably more points up for grabs at the end of the season with these debates than there is actual points we've got so far, which is quite interesting.
Well.
So podium, I'm gonna go for a Lewis Hamilton, Pierre Gasly, because of course he got his first podium in Brazil, and we'd love to see him do that again.
I'd like to see him win.
I would, but I don't think it's likely unless there is contact between Hamilton and Verstappen.
And then he's up there in 4th, where he has started quite a lot of races this year.
Including finishing last race in 4th, which was very impressive drive from him. We didn't really discuss too much about him.
He's just there. You don't realise it, and you're like, oh wait, there's a little blue mark on the TV screen that says gas. He's got the gas. He's quick.
Yep. So your podium, 2nd, 3rd place. Obviously, you've got Hamilton to win if there's no penalty, Verstappen
Yeah.
to win if there is.
So what do I go with? I think there's a chance they might take it. So on the basis of that, I'm out. On the basis of that, I'm going to go with Verstappen to win. So
Yeah.
obviously we already have that on the top. So he'll be top step. I do feel Hamilton could claw back a second, but there is also that chance. Actually, no, because they'll let him pass because he needs more points. So Hamilton will actually come in second, and I think this is going to be a bog standard one. I know I said that last time, and I was almost right. Yeah,
yes.
Valtteri Bottas. So it's a Verham bot this time instead of a Ham bot Ver or a Ham Verbot or whatever it is.
Yeah. So fastest lap, I'm just going to start this one off by going Pierre Gasly. Final lap.
Ping ping pong.
Yeah.
I think Red Bull, if they're in a position where they have a 23-second window or larger, they'll take the gamble, pit Perez, and he'll take the fastest lap away from if Lewis. They'll just do what they did the last time round.
A point that I think was raised last time during the race, I think by someone on Twitter, is at what point do Red Bull make the call to AlphaTauri to go for fastest laps?
I don't think they would be allowed to do that. There would be some sort of,
It's probably one of these. It isn't in
it
the
could
rules
happen.
anywhere.
It could happen, and nobody would notice it.
Yeah.
But everyone would be like, why all of a
Interesting.
sudden has every other race an AlphaTauri got the fastest lap, and why have they deliberately pitted? If they're gonna lose one grid place, would they not rather have an extra, 2-3 points or whatever it is, or how many points they finish? Would they not rather have more points than the fastest lap?
Still wouldn't be the biggest surprise of a fastest lap. Remember when Kevin Magnussen got fastest lap in one race? That was
how
crazy.
even Mazepin ended up with the fastest lap at one point, but obviously it got taken out of him. But
yeah, and driver of the day.
He actually had it at one point.
Yeah. So wildcard prediction. You go first for this one.
Wildcard. I think I already mentioned it, didn't I? Actually, no, I didn't. But I'm gonna say it anyway. Right, so we'll go for. I always go for a midfield team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, mid backfield team. Ooh, do I go Honda Power? I'm gonna go Honda Power. We've already mentioned Gasly, so we know Gasly's probably gonna finish well. We'll go with Tsunoda, and I think Tsunoda to finish top. Let's see. Top 8.
Top 8. Okay, I'm gonna go Russell top 9.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's fair enough.
I think that's all we've got time for in today's podcast. Rent, thank you for joining me for this one again.
No problem.
It was quite interesting. Of course, we've got the Sao Paulo Grand Prix next, and we'll hope you all join us for that one. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening, and hope you join us next time. Goodbye.
Mazepin no spin.
Oh yes, forgot about that. Goodbye.